The following program is a public access production. Comcast is required to provide time on this channel and make it available pursuant to franchise agreements with the communities we serve. Comcast is not affiliated with the following program or the producers of public access programming and is not responsible for the content. The following program does not reflect the opinions of Comcast or its affiliates.
Welcome to another edition of Discover Tinley, where we highlight the people and organizations in town that make our town a great place in which to live. And as we all know, Tinley Park is a pretty great place in which to live. Nothing big going on now the rest of the year. We got school year coming up in August. People going back to school, kids going and enjoying the summer. Hopefully summer has a good vacation time for them. Today our program is going to be on the road as we do every year with the Historical Society. Tinley Park has some pretty significant people and places in town that have been very significant over the years in Tinley. I don't know if a lot of people know about that, and we like to highlight it every year to let people know these are things that have happened in Tinley over the last years. And by coincidence, this year is the 125th anniversary of Tinley Park's incorporation. So last month we had a big celebration in town for the 125th celebration for the town's incorporation. Today we're going to be visiting with the Historical Society members with a couple of famous businesses in town and also a couple of famous houses in town that have some very prominent people. And I don't know if you know, but Tinley Park was a center of invention back in the early 1900s, 1800s, 1900s. A lot of things have gone on in there. So we're going to visit with some Historical Society people and talking about the places in town that are significant. Hopefully we can keep some of these places in town and restore some other places that gives Tinley Park the uniqueness that it is. So I'll tell you what, let's go inside and talk to our Historical Society members and see what's going on and what happened in Tinley Park the last 100 years. Well, we're inside one of the main buildings in the Historical Society here, and if you haven't had a chance to come and see this place, by all means come and see it. And we're going to talk today about some buildings and people in town here that had a tremendous impact on Tinley Park, and they still do to this day. And around the table we have here some very prominent people in the Historical Society who've done a lot of work and investigating all these and putting them down in paper and writing and books and everything. And I'd like to go around the table here and introduce the people who are going to be talking to us today. Ed, why don't you start out? Your name and your position here.
Yeah, Ron, hi, my name's Ed Simpson, President of Historical Society, and I have lived in town all my life.
Okay, we're not going to say how many years, are we? Okay.
Hi, I'm Julie Decker, and I'm a director here at the Tinley Park Historical Society.
And she's also the director of the Boat Visual Arts Center.
That's
so wearing two hats.
And I'm Pat Simpson, and I'm secretary of the Historical Society.
Okay.
I'm Phil Pursley. I'm a vice president of the Historical Society, and I was born and raised here.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize you're born and raised. Oh, wow. All right, we've got a lot of local residents here.
Yep.
We're going to start out with a building that's been very prominent in Tinley Park for over 100 years. It's now called Ed and Joe's, but Ed, why don't you talk about what was Ed and Joe's and where did it start out at?
Well, it's on the northwest corner of Andrews Avenue and Bachelor's Grove Road. Maybe a lot of people don't recognize that corner. Right now, it's 193rd Place and Oak Park Avenue.
173rd, isn't it?
193rd.
73rd.
Excuse me, 73rd.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, right, excuse me.
That's okay.
Right.
And what was it to begin with?
Well, the town, once it started in 1854, when the railroad went through, the town really started growing. Back then, it was mud streets, wagon roads. The road wasn't paved till 1923, so up to then it was a disaster if it rained. Around 1892, the big event in the area was the Chicago World's Fair that really made a big impact on many of the villages around. That started building in town. People in town were building hotels for people to come and stay. Also, people that would stop off the railroad.
Yeah, that was a big, railroad was a big factor in town at that time.
It was. It opened up businesses. But back then, that town was called New Bremen when it first started in that. With the World's Fair, the building I referred to on the corner was built in 1892. And it was called Columbian Hotel, built by Jacob Funk. Built completely out of wood. But something interesting, there was 2 brick buildings built before that in the community in the 1880s. So it was a growing town. Owners of this building was called Funk Saloon. Jacob Funk built it, but he was not the first owner. A Nielsen was an owner. Then there was a Rice until 1875. Then Jacob Funk finally bought it in 1895 after Rice. Jacob Funk ran it for quite a few years. They were renting the upstairs out, hotel rooms and that. Downstairs, they had a tavern called Funk Saloon. It was quite a stopping place. One of the drawing cards was a pool hall.
Dude.
We have some pictures showing gentlemen playing pool in the place.
Now, how long did Funks own that?
Well, they had it for something like 50 years.
Okay.
And once Jacob Funk, the original builder, had died, his sons took it over, Irwin Funk and Wilbur.
Okay. Then it became what now?
Then it still was Funk's Saloon or Tavern, whatever.
And then who took
And
over after
the 2 brothers ran it for a while. Then Irvin bought his brother out, and Irvin still ran the place with his wife Ava. They would make sandwiches, sell them at lunchtime and that. It was a local establishment, you know, as some of the other ones in town. Once the Funks got up in age, 1970 they sold it to a gentleman named Fees.
Okay, I remember Fees being the place when I first came into town, Fees,
yeah.
and then we're kind of running short of time, and then it became, then who became owners after that?
Then, in 1961, Ed Clark rented the West Addition out and started it, Ed and Joe's Pizza. He had a partner named Joe Pell.
And then
They had one of the first businesses, pizza business in the area that, you know, it started flourishing in that. Then this Mr. Fees got in trouble with the village and law enforcement. There was some shady work being done by a manager. And they closed the front saloon or tavern down because of the incidents.
okay, let's end up with Mike and Ellen
Yeah.
Clark own it now, and
right.
run a very nice establishment over there at Ed and Joe's Pizza Parlor and place. It's quite an establishment. That's that's almost over 100 years old. I
Yes.
guess. So
Actually, it's 125 years old right now, as a couple other establishments, which the village is celebrating 125 years right now. So it's kind of a coincidence that we're talking about a couple buildings 125 in this one. So.
Well, the next place we're going to go to is a famous house in town called the Poorman House. What's that the history about the Poorman House?
Well, the Poorman House is kind of interesting because you could go right past it and you wouldn't recognize anything special about it until we point it out to you. It belonged to John George Poorman, and he was born in Ohio in 1882. He came with his family to this area in 1910, and they settled on a farm around 147th and Oak Park Avenue, between Oak Park Avenue and Ridgeland, and they started a poultry farm. Okay, well, he obviously had an affinity for chickens because this man went on to invent a lot of things that were related to the poultry business. He had a very popular chicken brooder, which was a device to keep baby chicks warm, and it just consisted of feathers and a light bulb to keep them warm, and they felt like they were with Mama Hen.
And he invented that.
He invented it,
Wow.
patented for it. We have his patent here. It's kind of cool. But that was just one thing. He invented an incubator. He invented an egg turning apparatus. He invented a feed structure. In 1921, he received a patent for the designs for a poultry house. And then he also was the author of Poorman's Poultry Guide, which we are actually lucky enough to have here, a first edition, January 1922. And his book just tells you everything you would need to know, diagrams and all, about starting a poultry farm. And it is a really basic, wonderful guide. I mean, it's actually very educational. I can see why he was very popular. But all his popularity and all these inventions actually made him a very wealthy man. And that kind of worked against him because apparently in 1934 he received some kidnapping threats.
Oops.
Well, he was kind of in fear, and so he decided he should move away from out of town in the farmland and maybe get into town where there's people. So that's when this house was built. It was about 1935. They built we call it the Poorman House.
And about where would you say it's located? Where is it located?
It's on Oak Forest Avenue, and is it 66th Court or Street? What do you call that?
I think it's street,
I
yeah.
think it's Street.
Right across from
Forest
the
Avenue.
train crossing over there by...
Right, it's right by the train where Harper's Hill you
Harper's
call
Hill
it.
used to, yeah,
right on
yeah.
the corner of Harper's Hill.
Yeah.
And it was built like a fortress. The walls are 18 inches thick. It has very tall, narrow windows. Of course, these are things people don't notice when they're just driving past because, you have landscaping and it looks modern now a little bit. But if you pay close attention, you got to take a look. And, of course, the chicken coop is still in the backyard.
Oh, wow.
All right, so and that's another thing people don't notice. It's not just a big garage. So he lived there with his wife, Marie. And then after that, the last tracking we even have of him is in 1942 on his World War II draft card. He was 60 years old, but there's a draft card for him.
Oh, my.
And after that, in Tinley, we're not sure when he moved, but we do know that he passed away in California.
Okay.
And he is buried in Riverside County, California.
Oh, my.
So he's kind of one of the treasures of Tinley Park. The man was a very famous inventor. These inventions of his were used nationwide. So
Wow. Yeah, so the chicken industry, it gets a lot from him then, I guess.
yes, it does. Yeah.
And back then, I guess people in Tinley Park, a lot of them had chicken coops.
A lot of them did. I mean, this is farmland.
Yeah.
Chickens were big business
Yeah,
back then.
Wow.
So he made a lot of money off it.
So Poorman House over by Oak Forest Avenue, right across from the Harper's Ferry train thing. That's very good. Okay, and again, those walls are how thick?
18 inches thick,
Oh,
they
my
say.
goodness.
Which was very odd for at the time. That's
I
a
know
brick
it.
structure
I
of,
know. I know.
Yeah, very,
Well, we're thankful for John Poorman for bringing the chicken industry to Tinley Park and his famous house. So if you get a chance to go over there, look at it from the outside. We can't let you in. The next place we're going to go to is another wonderful house. And has a tremendous history of Tinley Park. Another inventor
Yes.
in Tinley Park. Pat, talk about the Rawhoff House.
John Rawhoff and his wife Emily moved to Tinley Park in the late 1890s. They met while they were in church singing in the choir in Chicago, and they courted during the 1893 World's Fair. In the late 1880s, they moved to Tinley and they had 2 children. John was an inventor and an amateur geologist. He liked fixing machines. He liked tinkering. One of his first inventions was the wooden spiral washing machine.
So he invented a washing machine?
That was one of his
Oh, my
first
goodness.
ones, yes. This factory was located at Oak Forest Avenue and Ridgeland Avenue in Tinley Park. John had 13 patents on different inventions.
Oh, my.
He was a very smart man. He had a broom with a special handle. He had a speedometer and a waterproofing compound called ironite. He had a drill, a clutch, a soap holder, and also a bicycle handle. He had a broom winding machine also. Yeah, and I didn't list them all. There are many more. If you'd like to come up to the museum, we have a list that you can look at. The most profitable of all his inventions was the ironite. This was a compound made of iron filings and cement that was ground to particles the size of face powder or sand, depending on the size that you wanted. It was used to waterproof the cracks in concrete to prevent water seepage. And it was used in many buildings in the area. John constructed the ironite factory in 1907 on a 2.5-acre plot on a spur of the Rock Island Railroad. The ironite company was very successful for 20 plus years, and it was one of the major industries in town.
And where was that building at?
That was off of 173rd, adjacent to the railroad tracks.
Oh, okay.
Ironite was shipped all over the United States and used in many different industries. It was used in many basements in Chicago also. He purchased land also to start a subdivision in 1910. The area was from the railroad to 171st. His home still stands at 7112 173rd Place and has a very distinctive exterior, similar to stucco. But is it? Could it be ironite? There was an article in the Tribune on March 23rd, 2000 that suggests it might be ironite.
And we got a can here of the actual original can of the ironite, right, in the museum here.
Yes, we do.
And that's what it looked like in the can.
Yes. And the house actually has not changed much in looks over the years. The only thing that I see that's really different is it's covered in ivy. Otherwise, it's pretty much the same.
And I might add, I was over there the other day and I found out some very long-standing people in Tinley Park live there. Larry and Nancy Coughlin, who've been in that house for 40-some years,
Yeah, isn't
are
that
living there to
something?
this day. I realized that, and they were very gracious to let us film their house and look at it. So that's the
That was
and there's a
nice.
nice plaque. You guys have put plaques in front of these places.
Yes. A historical plaque, designating the significance of the house. Some of our people worked for Ironite. Orley Buck was a plant manager. He was a shipper, a mechanic, jack of all jobs at the Ironite Company from 1949 to 1968. And we are also fortunate to have a diary or a work log of Herb Albers, who also worked at the ironite factory. He kept a daily log of the activities, amount of ironite shipped out, the amount that was ground, etc. I was very interested in history of the Hoover Dam, how many mules were used in the construction on the dam, and that the workers were paid 25 cents a day. Our family took a vacation to Hoover Dam, and I was very surprised to see when we went on the tour, while in a waiting area, a plaque attributing the use of ironite with helping to construct the Hoover Dam.
Wow.
Here we were, many, many miles from home, and it just made me very proud to be from Tinley Park and have somebody's name on the wall from Tinley Park being a part of making Hoover Dam. We have at the Tinley Park Historical Society a can of ironite, which we showed you in its original can, and we also have the work log of Herb Albers on file. Just so everybody kind of knows, the ironite, from what I understand, is still being produced, and it was purchased by a company called Fox Industry. They brought
Well, Iron Knights has had a big part of history, and John Rohoff was a big part of Tinley Park.
Yes.
All these years, so we're very fortunate to have the Rohoff family house in Tinley Park. Our next building is another hotel. Phil, what was the hotel that we're talking about?
Okay, the building that I'm going to tell you about is not only historically significant to Tinley, but is also one of the oldest buildings in our village. It was originally called the Pacific Hotel. We now know it as TN's. By 1853, the Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific Railroad was completed through what would be called New Bremen. In 1854, with the completion of the tracks to Rock Island, Illinois, Samuel Tinley from England was appointed the first station master to this brand new village. With the influx of many people going through the area, the need for a place to stay and have food and liquid refreshment became apparent. Gottfried Karl Dietz built a hotel for this purpose, naming it the Pacific Hotel. It had rooms upstairs for overnight guests and a saloon downstairs to quench any thirst a guest might have. The saloon part was also open to the public. In 1876, Henry Bolt buys the Pacific Hotel, and in 1887, he changes its name to the Bremen Hotel. When the village incorporates on June 28, 1892, 125 years ago, and becomes officially Tinley Park, Henry again changes the hotel's name to the Tinley Park Hotel. Unfortunately, Samuel Tinley, the longtime Rock Island Railroad station master, didn't live to see this village and hotel have his name. Samuel Tinley, born September 8, 1808, in Lincolnshire, England, a baker by profession, comes to this country in 1848 with his wife Sarah and 3 sons to become a farmer near Frankfurt. He quits farming in 1854 to become a part of our history. He dies on July 31, 1882, and is buried next to his wife at the Frankfurt Township Cemetery. In 1902, Henry Bolt retires and turns the ownership of the hotel over to his son, George. Neither father nor son were involved directly in the hotel or saloon. They leased this to various people. One of our museum photos shows Dick Bruning's name over the front entrance. In 1917, Pete Parenti opens an ice cream and candy store with his wife in Tinley. It was where Doc Cabot later would have his first drugstore. Previously, the Parentis had run a successful candy store business in downstate Illinois. When he opened this very popular Tinley business, he and his family lived in Blue Island. Later, Pete Parenti buys the old Tinley Park Hotel from George Bolt, and with the end of Prohibition in 1933, opens Pete Parenti's Tavern.
During Prohibition, it was not a saloon, was it?
No, legally.
Legally, okay. A little history in there we won't go into right now.
On December 18, 1936, the Tinley Park Times reports that Pete remodels outside with a log cabin style front. Inside also gets remake with light colored walnut walls trimmed in antique silver. On October 14, 1946, Pete dies at age 72. He is survived by his son Ferdinand and 2 daughters, Mrs. Jessie McMahon, Mrs. Marie, and Mrs. Marie Tehan. Marie and her husband Harold take over and change the name of this business to Parenti Tiens, then to just Tiens. On February 18, 1950, Harold Tien, World War I veteran, dies. He is survived by his widow and his son Harold. Harold Jr. now takes over the business and, like his father, continues to make changes. He adds a carry-out store to this establishment that sells not only alcohol, but milk, butter, cottage cheese, and other food items. Sometime in the early days of Tien's, they start selling pizzas, becoming Tinley's first pizza parlor. The person who talked them into doing this was Jim Benuso, who later starts his own very successful Tinley Park business, Venuso's Pizza. In 2014, Harold dies. The business is still run by members of the family. After 161 years, a Tinley Park building is still going strong as a business under now the TN family. Congratulations to this family for 100 years of success as business owners and citizens of Tinley Park.
Wow. So TN's has been around a long time,
Yeah.
and before that, so we've got the two hotels have been in town here over 100 years.
Right.
Yep.
So that's going to be fantastic. That's interesting. Tinley Park really has a lot of tremendous sites in town here that we're trying to promote every year to let people know these are some historical sites in town. We want to keep them, I hope. Thank you all for the Historical Society. Matter of fact, talk about the Historical Society real quickly, the days and hours and when you open.
Okay, we're located at 6727 174th Street, across from the train station in downtown Tinley. We're here every Wednesday from 10 to 2, the first Sunday of every month from 1 to 3, and the second Thursday evening from 6 to 8. Special appointments can be arranged.
Wow, and I understand a lot of the kids come over here, a lot of school children come over here to look at it too.
Oh, yes, we have.
So, well, hopefully we learned something today about Tinley Park, old and new Tinley Park, and hopefully you get a chance to come out here and look at it. Again, we're going to do this every year. We got some interesting things for next year. So again, thank you for watching Discover Tinley, and we'll see you next month.